Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. He shoots webs, climbs on walls, and sneaks up on me when I'm taking a piss. He also does what a spider can't. There are no spiders that swing on their webs. They're too small to get any momentum. It's also impossible for a man to do this. It's not safe. The massive weight of the G-forces would rip off his arms. But in the movies, a man has been swinging for over 40 years. Other superheroes fly, drive, and run. Web slinging is one of the most unique and exciting methods of super transportation. A good web sling can be visceral and satisfying, an expression of total freedom and propulsive fun. But it's difficult to get right. Even with multi-million-dollar computer effects, it takes ingenuity to make it look real. Why do some web sling scenes feel liberating while others fall flat? How did they do it? When did they start doing it? Well, the first web slinging scene was done without CGI. Practically. In 1977, CBS aired a pilot for their new TV show, Spider-Man. In the 90-minute episode, which, bear in mind, came out in 1977, how many web slinging scenes are there? 2. Actually, 1, because it's an alternate angle of the same swing, a swing that'd be reused several times throughout the show. The reason for this recycling is because that's a real stunt. So doing it again would mean risking a man's life. CGI wasn't an option because at the time, the most realistic looking CG character was a rotating head. It would take another decade for a full computer generated character. Since they couldn't use VFX to make it look real, stunt coordinator Fred Waugh chose the obvious option. Have someone actually swing from building to building. After 2 days of rigging, Fred wore the costume himself and took the first swing. As impressive as that was, in the comics, Spider-Man usually swings more than once. Luckily, also with no CG and a low budget, across the world, the Japanese were doing it better. カメラのレンズは真実を見る瞳。曇りなき瞳を信じる男。スパイダーマン。Japanese Spider-Man has several other modes of transportation, including a motorbike, a spider car, a giant robot mech, or his legs. But whenever he does web sling, you can't miss it, as he yells spider string before shooting his web. Spider string! Spider string! Spider string! And then the swing will be edited to repeat several times. The man in the suit is gymnast Hirofumi Koga. Most of his spider swings are safe stunts, low-angle swoops above the camera, except for this one. Which gave him several scars and bruises. But that's not the most dangerous stunt in the show. Koga climbed all sorts of structures, often without a rope, including a moving car. One time a stunt was too dangerous for even him, and he was swapped out for a more resilient stuntman, one that was 2 inches tall and made of plastic. The Japanese Spider-Man show delivers on comic book spectacle with handcrafted solutions. As inventive or dangerous as the American and Japanese Spider-Man shows are, these are practical stunts, so they can't match up to their comic counterpart without separating stunt doubles from their arms. It took 2.5 decades to make it look real, with every limb attached.
I got a call, and they told me I was going to be directing the film, and I had no idea how I was ever going to bring off what I thought all the fans must have been expecting. This great aerial ballet, this graceful movement of Spider-Man swooping through the city of Manhattan, through the canyons, and it had to be done with great grace and agility. His movements had to be incredibly fluid and beautiful to look at. When I knew it couldn't be an actor or a stuntman, it was mind-boggling how we were going to pull that off. How were we going to create this illusion? So that challenge was probably the biggest making the film.
At this point, Sam Raimi had made a name for himself with inventive practical effects, which Spider-Man still uses a lot of. But practical web slinging has a limit. To break past that limit, a modern invention was needed: the computer. Despite radical technical advances in very few years, computer effects were still in their infancy. CGI stunt doubles, or digi-doubles, which Spider-Man needed to be, sucked. One of the first digi-doubles was used in Jurassic Park. It's the lawyer who gets eaten by the T-Rex. A flawless effect, but hardly applicable to Spider-Man. For Titanic, motion capture was used to create hundreds of digi-doubles populating the ship. They are convincing from a distance, but up close, they look like this. Spider-Man needed to be in your face. Luckily, Raimi had a good team. John Dykstra was hired to supervise the visual effects. His resume included Silent Running, Star Wars, and Stuart Little, but his most relevant experience was in Batman Forever, where he and his team created a computer-generated Batman who swung past the frame, hung off a helicopter, and jumped off a building. Look familiar? 3 problems. These shots are at night, not completely convincing, and there's very few of them. The challenge of human character animation is that everybody in the world is an expert in human motion, because that's what we see every single day and have been seeing for 300,000 years.
We have to make that character incredible, but not unbelievable.
To create the digi-double, Tobey Maguire and his stunt double Chris Daniels had their bodies scanned into the computer to create duplicate models. The animators then studied how they both moved. But unfortunately, Tobey Maguire can't do this, so the team used several references for the animation, most of which aren't human, such as spiders, cats, and Disney's Tarzan. The way Spider-Man swung really came down to the VFX artists' imaginations, a tedious trial and error process until it looked right.
Tally-ho.
There are a few practical swings, like when Peter first discovers his powers, accomplished with big cranes holding a track and wires. So this is a real stunt. There is a lot of wire work in Spider-Man. Most of the stunt doubles are trained gymnasts, except for this guy because this is not a guy. An added challenge is they not only needed Spider-Man to swing around, but a New York to put him in. To create virtual New York, they used texture mapping. Texture mapping means that they took survey measurements of the positions of the buildings and photos to make a digital environment and then overlaid pictures of the buildings on top. They then added life to the city with CG cars, pedestrians, and birds. Spider-Man's final swing is the most complicated shot of the movie. It took 7 months to lock down the movements. The web slinging in this movie is a pioneering work of visual effects art, but it still doesn't look quite right. There is a surreal jerkiness to the digital character. In some shots, he looks artificially sped up. Luckily, they tried a few more times. The sequel pushes the web slinging to new heights, literally.
What we were missing to a certain degree was a little bit of the vertigo that it is to be Spider-Man, because his world is not 5 stories up, it's not 2 stories up, it's 75 stories up.
The visual effects are improved from the first in every way. The digi-double got better muscles, a better skeleton, and is more photoreal. The CG buildings were upgraded, and they started using the Spider-Cam more. The Spider-Cam is a tripod, except it doesn't have legs and isn't on the ground. It's essentially a camera setup with wires attached to different points high in the air. The camera then moves along a predetermined path using winches. That way the shot can be anywhere in 3D space and move very fast. A CG Spider-Man can be composited into a real environment way up in the air, and then shot at low frame rates to increase the sense of speed, just like this. Another key to making the web slinging look real is to make Spider-Man real as much as possible, cutting from a VFX Spidey swinging to a performer in a suit landing.
What the actor can't do, a stuntman does, and what a stuntman can't do, the CG model does.
During pre-production, storyboards identify what is CG and what is live action, either by drawings or animatics, which are crudely animated storyboards. Since the production plans these shots out early, the VFX can be better because the artists have time. For Spider-Man 3, they had a new challenge. How do you fake web swinging without a mask on?
In the previous films, we saw a lot of Spider-Man battling, but we always lost the main character that we loved, Peter Parker. So I felt it was important in this third film, like in the comic books that I've read, to have Peter be involved in the battles.
This is a visual effects nightmare because fabric is much easier to digitally replace than skin. A few different tricks were used to accomplish this. Blue screen wire stunts. Tobey's actually swinging now. With a blue screen behind him, he is elevated 7 feet off the ground. Wires are attached to his torso and shoulders and twisting his body to give him the back and forth web swinging motion. The second trick was straight out of Mission Impossible, face replacement technology. To scan a face, they put a lot of reflective markers on it to measure its topography. Then the actor would stand in a light stage. This crazy dome with hundreds of little lights simulating hundreds of different lighting conditions that could then be used on the CG models in any different lighting environment. Spider-Man 3 has a lot of editing within the frame. Instead of cutting from a digidouble to Tobey, within the same shot they'll switch between a Tobey Maguire and a digidouble, which is noticeable in some shots. I love the swinging in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies, but the limitations of early CG and supernatural camera work holds these scenes back for me. The storytelling and choreography is so good that those nitpicks don't really matter, but I do think the swing got better. Only 3 years passed between the end of the production of Spider-Man 3 and start of The Amazing Spider-Man. Yet I believe the web swinging is much more visceral, dynamic, and real. Probably because the team shot an insane amount of footage of stuntmen swinging on cables. Whether or not they used any of it in the final cut doesn't really matter, as it's excellent reference for the VFX artists. This time the animation is very much inspired by human movement. Stuntmen and gymnasts were studied extensively. The main comic inspiration is Ultimate Spider-Man, drawn by Mark Bagley. His dynamic poses were incorporated in slow-mo speed ramps. New camera angles were added, including this awesome first-person point-of-view shot, which is such a simple solution for a more immersive swing. Stunt coordinator Andy Armstrong figured out a way to have a stuntman swing past the cars.
Under Riverside Drive in Harlem, Spider-Man is going to be swinging, not unlike a trapeze artist, over cars and buses for real.
First they used a traveling winch rig attached to the bridge, and then they also designed a spider swinging truck, which has a sort of human puppeteering rig on the back, so that the stuntman could simulate swinging underneath the bridge. And all these cars are driven by stuntmen too. These shots are amazing. But most of the web swinging scenes take place at night, an effective and overused way of hiding CGI. So does this Spidey hold up in the light of day? I believe that the opening of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is the pinnacle of web swinging. This Spider-Man has a small difference that makes all the difference. They made the suit looser, with an added cloth simulation that responds to his movements and the turbulence of the wind around him. But that's not it. The character animation is inventive. Spider-Man barrel rolls through the air, does aerial hairpin turns, and transitions into slow-mo to hit poses out of comic panels. Much like the comics, where each muscle is distinct, the muscle animation is realistic and still somewhat visible through the suit.
The silhouettes and volumes are animated to specific lighting conditions for each shot, so that the contours of the sculpt are picked up in the specular areas of the render, just like in the comic book artwork where the muscle shapes are so clearly and artistically defined in dramatic lighting.
The camera work isn't artificially smooth, but is handheld. How do you go handheld in a digital environment? With this motion control camera rig, which grounds impossible shots with human impulse. The cinematography is much more dynamic, as we're not always following Spider-Man in the air, but given shots from a pedestrian's point of view or this beautiful GoPro shot. The sound design gives this scene rhythm and immersion, accented with web thwips and dramatic whooshes. Another small part of why this Spider-Man swings so much better is the actor's physique. Since Andrew Garfield is lankier, the ragdoll physics are more exaggerated. Then Disney makes a deal with Sony and Spider-Man has swung around in 6 MCU movies so far. Except he starts off by not swinging around too much. According to Steve Rollins, the animation supervisor for Captain America Civil War, we wanted to avoid imitating previous movie incarnations where the wall crawler is hitting all the comic book poses. It was about making him feel more real and awkward, like a teenager. This extends to Spider-Man Homecoming, where Spider-Man still doesn't swing much but instead hops around like a rabbit. An odd decision with the MCU Spider-Man is most every shot of Spider-Man in his suit is 100% CG. Even in the close-ups, that is a computer-generated man. Even if they made the costume and shot with it on set, they would cover it with CG. The rationale is that by going full CG, they can remove wrinkles and make costume design changes. But the lack of wrinkles makes him look too smooth. This shot from The Amazing Spider-Man is also 100% CG. But the MCU Spider-Man is missing one thing that The Amazing Spider-Man isn't: folds, creases, and a goddamn looser suit. In Avengers Infinity War, he swings for a few shots, but it isn't until his last scene in Spider-Man Far From Home where he really starts to swing. They found a way to bring MJ along without being cucked by a mannequin. To shoot these shots, they used a large blue screen, some big fans, and a wire rig to hold both Tom Holland and Zendaya. For New York, repurposed photography from the Avengers was used to build the CG buildings. Tom and Zendaya did some stunts on location for reference, but these shots are all CG. While it doesn't compare to the Amazing movies, I'm a fan of this scene. I like the varying compositions and visual gags, but the tightness of the suit and lack of comic book poses holds it back. Even in No Way Home, with the return of Tobey and Andrew, the swinging isn't quite right. The character animation is exceptional, with each Spider-Man retaining their unique swinging behavior from the previous movies. The suits are too tight and the landings can be bouncy. The final swing is rough. The movement, especially on this slide, looks keyframed. The deterioration of the swing isn't necessarily the fault of the VFX artists, who were locked into using a specific Spider-Man design without a loose suit. Good VFX take time, so Marvel Studios' breakneck release schedule could be to blame. Before quitting the infamous Spider-Man Lotus movie, this VFX team created this beautiful web swinging scene. Extensive photography and Google Maps Street View of New York was used to create the environment. The suit model is incredibly detailed with scratches and wrinkles, and the character animation is expertly staged. Along with this, there are some excellent fan-made animations that capture web swinging better than most of the movies. That's because digital effects are an art form, one that takes work and creativity. The reason why this looks better than this is because inspired choices by human beings were made. In the words of John Dykstra, "The computer is a tool. It's like a hammer. It doesn't by itself know how to build a house until someone puts their hand to it." Hopefully the next Spider-Man movie uses lessons from the past to create tactile and memorable web swinging scenes. A looser suit, dramatic sound design, comic book poses, focus on realism, creative character animation, triumphant score, it's all in this scene. And if they learn a lesson from even further back, instead of losing hundreds of millions of dollars, risk losing a few stuntmen instead.